Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're going to be taking a look at a Seraph Haven deck. Of course, Seraph isn't the only way to win this deck. You can just purely outvalue based on the amulets we are running here, which is pretty nuts. We are only running one City of Gold because obviously it's not a super key card. You don't need it to win the game, but it does make winning a lot easier. So that's why you are running just one of it and then favoring other amulets in its stead. So it'll definitely give you an edge, but if someone takes it out with a Seraph, it's really not that bad and you can usually recover pretty nicely, as the procs still go off pretty quickly thanks to the amount of amulet drop down costs like Hollow Dogma, Healing Prayer, Omen of Repose and stuff like that you're running, which really does help you out. So we're going to get right into this and check it out. So first up we've got Dragon. Dragon is reasonably popular in the current unlimited meta, as far as what I can tell, just because it is an extremely solid deck when it comes to being aggressive. We're actually going to be covering Storm Dragon, Aggro Dragon, whatever you want to call it. We will be covering it reasonably soon. I've got that in my planned list for videos, for this whole kind of unlimited weekish thing that we're doing. Mainly because we do have the Grand Prix, so we're going to be covering a heap of unlimited videos. Plus, I haven't covered much of this expansion so far, and we're almost the first month in, so we may as well start covering some unlimited decks. So we're going to start off reasonably solid. I mean, we're going to take a little bit of damage, but we're going to be able to go for City of Gold. I usually do look for some early drops and try and avoid drawing City of Gold as much as I can, as thinning your deck out is a lot easier if it is in your deck. And Forbidden Ritual, this is what I really like in these sort of matchups. Going up against aggro decks, Forbidden Ritual is a key card to have, so whenever I come up against Dragon, I do like to mulligan for that card as much as I can, so I have at least one available to me. And sometimes I do debate on whether it's worth it. In this case, I've decided with just two things on board, it wasn't worth throwing the Forbidden Ritual right now. I was better off waiting another turn. There is the Seraphic Blade, which as I mentioned, isn't obviously 100% needed to win, but it does make it a lot easier. So Globe of Stairways, and a nice Omen of Repose. This will easily proc this. And with an Evo on the Repose, it does negate some damage to it, so it is going to be able to survive two major attacks, which is good, while we get a little bit of damage to the face. Then all we really need to worry about from here will be, of course, closing out the game as much as possible, and dealing with things like Dark Dragoon Forte here is really going to be important. But since they did go face, this should make things a little bit easier, especially since they killed that. Now my Forbidden will actually be able to kill this. It's not the best way to deal with it, but it certainly is a way. Better than playing the Themis Decree. Themis Purge is the 8-drop gold to just wipe the board, so definitely much favouring this to get 12 damage to face. Plus it will save, of course, my Decree for, well, it'll probably be next turn based on what my opponent's doing here. Maybe the turn after, if we can survive this. So we don't really have another way to deal with this at the moment. So we're just going to Decree it. We really didn't have another way to deal with it, unfortunately. But at least now I can kind of set these two cards up. Get them ready to go. And there is the Phoenix Rider play. So they're going a little wider with this. And that is a really nice draw. Holy Lord is going to allow us to wipe this board. Still puts us in a risky position, but not necessarily a bad one. I also set up, of course, the Forbidden just so I can negate any kind of low drops that might be played next turn. They most likely would only have one or two cards anyway, so the odds of them playing stuff would be reasonably low. There is the Poseidon. That one's a little more tricky. We've got to deal with this Poseidon as effectively as we can. So we really need this 1 in 3 chance. I really should have narrowed it down to a 1 in 2. Luckily we still hit the 1 in 3. And that did allow us to wipe the board. It just would have been much better if I had have dealt with it in, of course, a more pragmatic way. And that did lead to, of course, Dragon conceding. Because what do you do when you're down to that many cards in your hand, really? So while the last Dragon player didn't have a lot of options, and we did go for a more control style in the end to really drag the game out, because we couldn't drop Seraph comfortably on any turn, this Forest matchup is a little bit of a different story. So again, like Dragon, you do want to take a more aggressive approach to controlling the early game, which is why I did trade out most of my early game hand except for Black Inscriptor, which is a really good early game card. And going for Sealed Tomb as early as I can because I just want that extra draw. I need to get stuff into my hand as effectively as I can. And unfortunately that wasn't great, but it does mean I get to skip for City of Gold, which is actually pretty decent. If I had to skip for anything, City of Gold is definitely what I'd want to skip for. And I'm not too worried about a 2-1 Goblin at this point. Not when I can go for a much bigger clear. So Elf Song, so I know they haven't got a great hand, because you wouldn't be playing Elf Song if you had a really good hand, you'd be waiting to combo it off. Unfortunately, we did miss out on the better hit of the two. But we're going to be able to ramp up, while at the same time setting up a fairly decent body. Which does mean our Decree should be fairly good. We should be able to pretty much decree the board if we want to. Not that that's the only option, we've definitely got a couple of good options available to us now. We can actually go for this Omen of Repose and our Black Inscriptor, which will allow us to clear the two big drops pretty comfortably, while surviving with 4 HP, which is exactly what you want so that you do manage to take at least 2 more hits on the Repose. I really do love that card. Omen of Repose turned into one of my favourite HavenCraft cards overall. When it comes to unlimited play especially. Now, we can pretty much go for Seraph. I mean, the odds of them killing us next turn are reasonably low. They've got a pretty stacked board and would have to trade these guys off if they wanted to stand a decent chance to go for a good Roach combo. I'm sure they could find a Roach combo, but the odds of it would have been much lower. So playing the Seraph, where we can literally win next turn as long as they weren't going to remove it, was definitely the best way to go. So with a healing and a hollowed, we will just end the game. Since the city did end up dropping it by 1 automatically, and of course them ending their turn, dropped it another one, so we only need 2 procs. Which, having that already set up, gave this game a fairly easy conclusion. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. While this deck obviously isn't a perfect deck for the meta at the moment, I have found some matches can be more tricky than others, especially the Shadow matchups. If Shadow just gets a pretty average hand, they can steamroll this deck, but in most of the other matchups, it can be fairly decent. Of course, unless you counter real heavily in the Shadow matchup and get lucky, then of course you can swing it your way, but dealing with repeat boards up to 4 to 5 times can be quite difficult at certain times. So I'd say it's a close to 50-50 matchup, probably a little in Shadow's favour overall, but against most other aggro decks, you can normally roll them over very, very quickly with Forbidden Ritual and Decree. You only really need 2 good board wipes, and then it's really hard for them to recover. And overall, this deck just performed right within what I would expect for Seraph right now. From most meta lists I've looked at, or at least the couple I've looked at that are updated enough, Seraph is still ranked fairly highly, but I would definitely say it's more of a high tier 2 deck than tier 1 in my experience. So if you guys did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find deck list in the description below. Until next time, see ya.